I could feel very secure in a friendship, and then
Mhm.
in a romantic relationship, depending on the person I'm engaged with, their attachment patterns,
Mhm.
I could shift into maybe being anxious or avoidant, depending on where they're at, right?
Right, right. And why those intimate relationships or partnerships can be very different than, say, like in a friendship or a work relationship, is because they really do mirror a lot of the vulnerability that we organically had during that attachment phase in childhood, which is I am needing you to meet my needs, whether they are basic needs or emotional needs, which is what we are doing when we go into an intimate relationship with somebody, is this agreement of reciprocity of needs.
Hi, everyone. It's the Ego Project, where we do the perfectly imperfect work of healing our ego wounds. And I am Lisa Heidel. I'm here with my co-host,
Cristine Seidel.
and we are going to be talking about attachment patterns. But first, we want to say very happy birthday to Cristine today. We're taping on her birthday, and she's generously giving her time. But let's celebrate you. And Cristine, the world is a better place with you in it.
Thank you. What a perfect day for attachment discussions on the day of my birth.
Exactly. And today, Cristine and I are going to be discussing attachment patterns, our own personal journeys of attachment, based on our guests, Eli Harwood and Joy Malik. Joy spoke about couples in attachment. Eli spoke about parenting and attachment. And of course, both of those go back to our early attachment patterns. So we're jumping in today, and this is going to be a very personal conversation between Cristine and I. So are you ready, Cristine?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Okay. Okay, so for those who have not been able to listen to Joy and Malik yet, or Joy, Malik, and Eli yet, can you give them a rundown on attachment patterns, just for
Sure.
those who are new to us?
Yeah, absolutely. So attachment patterns are created when we are in the attachment phase of childhood, which really is birth to about 2 to 3 years old. And actually, a lot of what we're kind of discovering is that in utero, we can have some attachment dysregulation, for say a fetus or a baby who is whose mom is under chronic stress, or who is already decided to put the child up for adoption. The detachment or attachment can occur in utero as well. So during the attachment phase is really where we learn about how to get our basic needs met. And then as we become more sufficient, we learn how to have our emotional needs met. So in attachment phases, we can have anything from a really secure attachment, meaning our caretakers know how to meet our needs, both basic and emotional. Or we can have an anxious attachment, which means there is some dysregulation in the parent or caretaker being able to meet it. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Avoidant tends to be when our caretaker was not attending to our emotional needs mostly. And then we have the anxious avoidant, which is kind of a mix of both, in which there was most likely a lot of chaos within the home environment.
So would the anxious avoidant be the disorganized?
Yes. So it could also be called disorganized. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for sharing that, because, we're learning a lot about what attachment is. And I think there's some confusion about the languaging around it.
Right.
So, what we're using is the therapeutic. Am I
Correct.
accurate about that?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
More of the therapeutic language. And it, over the last couple of years, it has shifted a little bit in terms of that fourth category of what we call anxious avoidant or disorganized. But it really comes down to those four labels, knowing that attachment can be a spectrum, right? So if we are, have previously maybe been an avoidant attachment, through work, we are moving more towards secure attachment. So we may identify as, secure avoidant attachment, meaning we're closer to secure, but still have some of those avoidant tendencies. So just being mindful that we can be anywhere on the spectrum of each of those labels.
Thank you for saying that. And we're going to loop back around because I'm secure avoidant. We'll talk about that in a moment and kind of explore that. And I'll share some of my own journey with that. But I want to say that, as Eli and Joy both said, that, depending on the person across from us, the person that we're engaged with, as you know, as we're aging in our life, our attachment styles can change, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I could feel very secure in a friendship, and then in a romantic relationship, depending on the person I'm engaged with, their attachment patterns, I could shift into maybe being anxious or avoidant, depending on where they're at. Right.
Right. And why those, intimate relationships or partnerships can be very different than, say, like in a friendship or a work relationship, is because they really do mirror a lot of the vulnerability that we organically had during that attachment phase in childhood, which is I am needing you to meet my needs, whether they are basic needs or emotional needs, which is what we are doing when we go into an intimate relationship with somebody, is this agreement of reciprocity of needs. So because that layer of vulnerability is different with, say, our romantic partners, we tend to reflect a little bit more of our childhood attachment.
Thank you for saying that, because when we were speaking with Joy during her conversation about relationships, couples,
right?
And, as we were progressing, once again, I'm an internalizer, I'm highly independent woman. And so I said, well, first we have to be secure within ourselves, right? And Joy in her sweetness. So kind of, well, Lisa.
I know, she's so good.
And she said, that is a misconception that we have, because attachment must be done with a relationship in order.
Yeah, exactly.
My mind blew, because I'm always like, oh, let me keep working on me.
Right.
I can show up better and better and better. And there's nothing wrong with doing self-work and personal.
Absolutely.
But the thing that I've been kind of excluding from the equation for a while now has been other people.
The other person to attach with.
It's kind of like, trying to, do a double Dutch by yourself, right?
You're like, why isn't this happening? But it's so interesting that you've already, if you look at how you identify, which is a secure avoidant, that's very typical of that avoidant part, right? Is let me do this on my own until I'm perfect, basically, and then I will attach to somebody, because we're really kind of avoiding that vulnerability to some extent.
Well, and I think the thing that I love, because I think that word avoidant, people automatically assume, that you withdraw from relationship. And sometimes you do, right? Like, as we just discussed, I'll go off by myself, and be like, oh, I'm going to go fix me, right? And then when I am in relationship as an avoidant dismissive, I dismiss my own needs. I leave me out of the equation. Right? I say, okay, what does this person need? And how can I meet it? And I'm going to be honest, in romantic relationships, partnered relationships, I've typically partnered with anxious avoidant. I think anxious avoidant. Right. And so, they kind of, our patterns played off each other.
Right.
And also, but I've done a lot of personal work, so I have secure in there. So hopefully that number keeps click up, right? Right. So in your work with clients, what do you see, like me as an example, a secure avoidant, like how would you guide them on this pattern?
Well, I think that, you really did recognize, like, dismissing kind of your needs, but oftentimes, with that more secure avoidant or very, very avoidant, right? Like maybe they're much further on the spectrum. They're very detached somewhat from their needs. They're not clear on what their needs are because in childhood, those emotional needs were not really met, right? So oftentimes they're almost out of touch with what their needs are. And so when somebody is coming to them needing, wanting their needs met, they're almost like, whoa, what is this? Like, I don't even know what my needs are, let alone how to meet your needs. So there's almost this detachment from being able to really, really dip into, this is what I need, and then show up to a relationship saying, this is what I need. The other person says, oh yeah, cool, I can meet that need. Like, that's fine. These are my needs. And they say, oh, great, wonderful, I can do that. And then you have that reciprocity, right? But with the avoidant, they tend to not be aware of it. So then they may either withdraw more or kind of, be a little detached, or when somebody is coming to them with their needs, they're almost trying to figure out, well, how do I meet those needs, right? So they almost kind of fumble with it a little bit. And again, we have to remember that very few people, I think it's 6 or 7% of the population, actually have the privilege of having very secure attachments in childhood. Most people are going to end up somewhere on the spectrum, right? Of secure, of avoidant or anxious. And it's how we become more aware of that through those relationships that we end up determining where we really are. So, just because you have some of these patterns doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you, because most people will have something on the spectrum of anxious or avoidant.
So in childhood, when we're attaching to our caregivers in whatever form they're in, and of course you attach to every caregiver differently, and
Right.
every person in your life who is in a caregiving function. It could be grandparents, it could be aunties and uncles, it could be babysitters, right? It could be
Right.
any a nanny. So of course mother or father and parents. And do you tend to see in the work that you do that if you have a child who's anxious, that their primary caregiver might be avoidant? Like, can you see a pattern along that line?
Really not so much, because it really is the child's experience with that parent, right? And so, really where we see the most defined is where we see that disorganized attachment or the anxious avoidant, which tends to be homes with like addiction or significant violence. Like, we see that there. Now, avoidant tends to come when you have parents that don't attune to you emotionally. So they themselves could be avoidant because they're just lacking attunement. They could be anxious. Maybe there's something going on in the relationships and they're anxiously trying to get their needs met. So it's really just how that caretaker actually shows up to that child, not necessarily what their pattern is within their relationships. So it's fascinating, because it's really this imprinting that occurs during this phase of childhood, and it's whatever is showing up in that child's life at that moment.
And so when you have a child that comes in and you can see a pattern, right? You can see their attachment pattern. That's family work, right? That's where you bring the parents in. And so you have to then take a step into their childhood and help them heal their attachment wound, right?
Yeah. Very often when I do work with children, of course, that's systems work that you're working with the parents and the parenting. They oftentimes a light bulb will go on in session and they'll be like, you know what? That makes so much sense. And that's exactly what my father would do. And this is exactly what I needed, is what we're doing with little Timmy here. So it is interesting for them to come to that place of awareness where it's like, wow, I definitely don't want to do what my parents did to me. And then they start kind of doing a little bit of their own healing work around attachments. Because attachment is so fascinating to see the pattern. You see it in the relationships, you see it in parenting. And what's amazing is that if we can see a pattern, then we can work really, really succinctly and effectively to correct it and to heal it. So, yeah.
It's true. Well, I'm going to kind of flip the camera onto you now. Okay.
Yeah,
So, are you comfortable sharing your attachment styles?
absolutely.
Attachment patterns?
Absolutely. Yeah. I come from a very large family. I'm one of 7 kids. So, when I was younger, there was a lot of needs to be met, even just basic needs, but especially emotional needs. There's 5 girls, 2 boys, so there were lots of feelings flying around. And, my dad, he traveled a lot for work, and my mom had her hands full, right? So, in childhood, although, we lived in a very, privileged area, I went to great schools, there was still this, somewhat lack of emotional needs being met. And again, we always, kind of meet our parents where they're at. We understand what their capacity was at that time. But in that, environment, I did develop that more avoidant attachment. So, going out into the world and kind of, building relationships from that perspective, especially intimate relationships, it was very difficult for me to really even get in tune to myself, to be like, what do I need? How do I show affection? How do I say I love you? Because those were not things that, I was taught or received in childhood. Even though I could say, well, I wasn't, abused, I wasn't this, that, or the other, it was still just this lack of emotional needs attunement. So that, that can come from having a big family and there's just not enough time, energy, or resources for everybody, or it can come from a situation where the emotional capacity of a caregiver is just not able to meet the child with their emotional needs.
Thank you for sharing that, because I'm also from a large family, and there was, one person, 5 kids, right? One person, 6 kids. It does, everything gets diluted.
Right. It does. Yeah, it does.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I've learned, and through my personal work, through understanding my attachment patterns, is how often, one, I don't voice what I need. And it's not that I'm trying to withhold something.
Yeah.
I'm not actively saying, well, they don't care, anything of that nature. It just doesn't cross my mind to share.
Right.
Because there was, in my early attachment, there was no one meeting that need. And I figured out early on that if I voiced it, I was probably going to be disappointed.
Correct.
So I just took care of it myself.
Exactly. So that's, the avoidant can be highly self-sufficient, right? They can be the internalizer, to where it's like, okay, I just need to kind of do whatever I need to do in order to get by, because most of the time if we voiced a need, it was just kind of like dismissed and shot down. And so we're like, okay, never mind. And so you become very detached from your needs. And so then you kind of go through life just being like, well, I don't know what this thing is that people need because I don't have it. I'm kind of doing my thing. Right.
Well, and I try to, I personally, through my work, like, I ask people very directly, like, is this something that you need? Would you like me to do this? And I ask them. And of course, anytime you're working with someone else in whatever form, friendship, relationship, right? You have to, they're working with their own attachment. So if there's someone avoidant and I say, well, is there anything I can do? Probably they're going to be like, one, I have no idea, but they'll probably say, no, I'm fine. I'm fine. Oh, I can take care of it. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. And I think we really complicate a lot of things in our romantic relationships, because we think that these needs are these like, very complex things, like I need you to be available to do this, that, and the other, right? Like those are probably more wants. Sometimes our needs can be very basic. Like I need hugs. I need to be told I'm loved. I need to be told that I'm accepted. Like these needs are still very basic needs that we probably didn't have met appropriately in childhood that we still need to have met in adulthood. So asking people what their needs are is, I think, a great exercise to do when you are in this, reciprocal relationship, but then understanding it's okay if some things are wants and some things are needs, we can find a way to meet those. But fundamentally, our needs tend to be pretty simple and clear: safety, love, acceptance. And there's nothing right or wrong with these attachments. It's just learning how to work in a relationship with them to get them closer to secure.
That's good. I find for me, one of the practices that I've been implementing is if I'm in a situation where I'm feeling uncomfortable, in my body, where, I need to express myself, my natural inclination is to take a step back. And I'm working on taking a step forward. I don't have to walk all the way across the room, right?
Right, right.
A little closer. And that can look like, oh, I'm struggling right now. I'm going to put language around that and say, I'm struggling right now. I'm going through a hard time.
Right.
Don't know. I don't really need anything. I just need you to know this.
Exactly.
And if the person responds in a way that makes me comfortable with, I'm here for you. I understand. Is there anything that I can do? Something that, then I know that's a safe person.
Right.
Who cares about, right? If I share that and someone was like, well, not my problem. Well, you did this and I don't care what your problem is, right? Yeah. That's a person that I'm not going to build a secure pattern with them, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, you're not going to, because, really what attachment is looking for is safety, and, we think, right? Like we think, okay, if somebody is not willing to meet my need or is rude, kind of like that, when I show up to express the need, then I, of course, would not have anything to do with that. But attachment is so funky that even the things that we would think we would not, participate in, if they feel familiar to things that we experienced in our early attachments, we probably will.
That's a very good point. So I'm going to ask you, so part of attachment and doing the attachment work so that we can move from insecure attachment to secure attachment, right? That's the goal, is to feel secure in our relationships. And so let me see how to word this. Healthy repair is so important in all relationships. Yet if you have an insecure attachment, healthy repair is challenging.
It is.
Right.
Yes. Very challenging.
Can we explore that a little bit? So
yeah. So I think what I'm hearing you say is, when we are closer to secure, right, we can move in and out of connection with people and then connect with ourselves, right? So we know how to go in and out of being independently connected to being, two-person connected, right? We feel very safe in that. Insecure attachments is when we don't feel safe being connected with others when we come back to connect with self. Or we might feel super connected to self, but don't feel safe when we're connected to others. And that's because, connection within relationships it's a dance, right? We have to attach and detach at times, whether there's distance, whether it's, kind of like in a young age, going to school and coming home, right? Separation, anxiety comes from attachment. Whether it's disconnect because we're not seeing things the same way, and so we're missing connection. It can be where there's conflict, like literal conflict. And so insecure attachment occurs when we feel disconnected from our caregiver and there's no coming back, right? So if we are disconnected because of conflict, disagreement, whatever, and harm has occurred, and we don't come back together to process that, like, so even a parent, say, is in a bad mood and snaps at a kid and hurts the kid's feelings. If that parent doesn't come back and say, hey, I'm really sorry, I was snippy when I came home today. My head was still at work and I was, hadn't had anything to eat, but I shouldn't have done that to you. And in the future, I'll be more mindful before I walk through that door that I'm available for you. And then the child's like, it's okay, mom, hug, right? If we don't do that, if we just dismiss it and all these things, a child will take that as I'm going to remain disconnected from you. So repair is really important so that we, in our disconnection, if it's disconnection because of conflict or harm or disagreements, that when we connect, it's acknowledged. And so repair is very, very important when we are trying to get closer to secure attachment.
That's so good. Can we talk a little bit about an avoidant and how they can, move more to secure so that through healthy repair, and then an anxious, and kind of what you see between two, and how, that repair happens.
Right. So in a lot of dynamics, a lot of relationship dynamics, you really do see a lot of the anxious avoidant coupling, right? Because they tend to find each other. It tends to be the pacing of romantic relationships. The avoidance first response is to disconnect, almost to withdraw a little bit when there's conflict or something that feels like they have to be vulnerable. The anxious is to reach, to jump forward when there's disconnect. Like I need my needs met. I need to be my needs met, right? What happens when that occurs is, let's say there's a conflict, the avoidant might just be like, well, I'm leaving, I'm going driving. And the anxious is like, no, we need to talk about this, right? What you need in this dynamic is you need some kind of plan, right? Like you really need to say, not in that moment, right? Like, this is what I'm going to do, but you need to say, hey, we are disconnected right now. We're disagreeing. We're not seeing this in the same way. We need to take a time out. And we know that when we take a time out, I go into the other room and I disconnect and I calm down, all the things. And I really, get clear on what I'm trying to say, what I need, or whatever it is, right? Like the avoidant needs to be able to ground themselves and being able to hear what's being spoken or said or coming up. And the anxious needs time to ground, to be able to know that they're safe, right? So in those dynamics, you really have to have a plan. If you're trying to play it out in conflict, you're going to go in a fear cycle. That's just going to go round and round and round. The avoidance is going to withdraw and the anxious is going to pursue, right? And that's what we call fear cycles. We rehearse these things over and over again. So the goal is really, prior to conflict in these relationships, is to have a plan. When we disagree, how do we disagree in a healthy way? And how do we come back together to make repair? And that's typically we don't know this until we end up in couples therapy. But if you recognize it in your own relationships, you may even be trying to find some solutions, as it is. Hey, when we're doing this, let's just take a time out. And, but neither one of us leave the house. Right. And so a lot of couples will kind of come up with these, bridge plans, but really it requires a plan, because those two attachments are not in that moment of conflict going to be able to get out of that fear cycle until things have calmed down.
That's good. I love that idea of having the plan. And I think you also have to have the plan for yourself. Right. And that requires you to say, right now I'm feeling overwhelmed, or
Mhm.
right now I'm feeling disconnected. I know myself well enough to know I need to take a little time
Right,
to
right.
process through this.
Mhm.
And I will return to you
Mhm.
and to
Mhm.
discuss this.
Mhm.
I think as an avoidant, I know that about myself, that I need
Right.
to be with myself to process through my emotions, my feelings. And
Mhm.
in the past, one of the things I neglected to do was saying, I will return.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely, absolutely. That is 100% something, and again, when you are in conflict, you're kind of going back to that old conditioning, that old wound, right? And the avoidant needs to know, okay, if I need to withdraw and my partner is calling me, maybe I shouldn't hit decline 85 times, right? Maybe I
Yeah.
should pick it up and say, I can't, I really can't talk about this right now, but I will call you back tomorrow. We will
Yeah.
talk about this tomorrow, right? And the anxious would need to know, okay, when there's conflict, I can't call them 85 times. I'll send them one text and be like, I'm really, upset about this, that, and the other, but what can we circle back tomorrow and discuss this, right?
Yeah.
So you see how those two get together, and it's just a cycle. But you do have to do that plan for yourself in terms of, like, I know my go-to is to withdraw, and I'm going to ignore you. I'm going to pretend like you're not even in this world for a period of time. And I can't do that if I'm choosing to be in a relationship with somebody. And the anxious attachment needs to know I go into this fear state, and I need to have solutions right then and there, and I need them to do this. I need, right? But I won't, because I know that I'm choosing to be in this relationship. So I'll call them one time. If they don't answer, I'll send them a text, and really coming up with that internal plan for yourself. Mhm.
Well, let me ask you this. So, I've been in relationship with avoidant as well. Those don't last very long.
I was about to say, let me tell you about the coupling
Those are
that
rather short-lived.
never gets together.
Exactly. And, to reach out, as an avoidant, for me to reach out to someone
Mhm.
feels uncomfortable,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
As I'm healing my attachment patterns, right? And then when I have an avoidant who then, they withdraw, and sometimes a friendship or relationship just dissolves
Yeah.
because neither one is taking that step forward.
Mhm.
And it could be an easy repair.
Mm.
It was a
Correct.
misunderstanding. I've done a lot of personal work.
Yeah.
I'm no longer as busy at work. Right.
Right.
That
Yes.
type of thing.
Yeah.
It was, I didn't intentionally do any harm. But when you
Mhm.
get these two avoidance, it's like me. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And oftentimes they don't even end up coupling together,
Yeah.
right? They tend to, however they may be dating in this world, you probably would even see their text conversation just kind of go, right? But if they did happen to get together and they did have conflict, you would see a lot of just, I'm just not, you know what, like, forget it. I'm just not going to call her back, or I'm just going to get really busy with work and pretend like I don't have time, which, maybe they're not conscious of that, but yeah, they tend to not get together. They kind of fall to the side. But if they do get together, you don't see a lot of repair being done where it's like very proactive. I mean, again, if they've gotten closer to secure, of course you would. But in that, like, kind of full avoidant, space, they really just kind of detach from showing up for the other person. Mm-hmm.
Right. I have to say, doing Eli Harwood's workbook, which is called Securely Attached.
Right.
We'll put the link in the description. I highly recommend
Yeah.
listening to both episodes with Joy Malik and Eli Harwood. But I've been doing the book, and the information that I'm garnering about myself is
Mm-hmm.
so valuable
Right.
as I'm going through that. And, both Joy and Eli and you have said, we can reach securely attached
Mm-hmm.
in relationships. it's not like, well, I've had some big T traumas and some little T traumas, and I've had bad relationships in the past that didn't work. And, I'm accountable for my actions, so I must be bad at it.
Right.
My
Right.
picker's broken, that type of thing.
Yes.
But there's work that can be done here.
Right.
And, some of it is like, oh,
Mhm.
it's just epiphany work, right? Like,
Mhm.
I didn't realize that. But then when you're in relationship, engaging with someone, that's really where you're going to see those triggers.
100%. And that's really where you get to that securely attached. You can do this attachment work as an individual. I mean, because, as an avoidant, like I love to work, right? But work can sometimes be a place where I'm avoiding, right?
Yep.
So there are things that we develop individually through our attachment that aren't necessarily, they may have served us well in childhood, but we don't need them anymore. We can work on that. We can heal that to become more securely in our independent attachment to self. But in that relationship is really where we get to see the pinnacle of our work and our healing of the conditioning or of the wounds, because our partner is the place where we're reflecting that vulnerability. And it requires that level of vulnerability to really mirror the vulnerability we had in childhood.
And you have to have a partner that is willing to do the work as well.
Yes.
You can't, if you don't have that, no matter what you do, you're once again trying to double.
Yes.
You're right. Dutch jump rope with just you, and you just can't do it. You have to have someone on the other side of that teeter-totter.
You do. And I think that, this is where a lot of people, as they come to couples therapy and they start learning more and more and more, the couples that tend to find couples therapy not successful is when one of them begins to do the work and the other one continues to stay in their, insecure attachment and their conditioning and wounding. And the other person just can't get to a point where they are able to have their needs met, but they're aware of their needs. And so they really kind of like come to this point of like, I can't do this anymore because I know what it's like now to be moving to secure. And this just feels chaotic to me now.
Thank you for saying that, because I think so often people are like, well, if we go into counseling, it's going to fix everything. And it's like, well, that's just one space to hold, a spotlight on what's really going on here.
Right.
And then the work has to be done outside of the relationship. And that's the same thing in friendships. I've had friendships that, they've gone through roller coasters, depending on what's going on in each of our lives. And if we keep returning to each other, speaking honestly, speaking candidly, sharing, being vulnerable, the friendship only gets stronger.
Right. It does.
It doesn't dissolve. We don't go on separate paths. We heal, really have healthy repair there.
Absolutely.
And, which is, so rewarding. And like you said, in romantic relationships, partnerships, marriages, wow.
Yeah.
That's where it happens. That's where
that's where it happens, whether it's the healing or the old conditioning turns into just, a very painful place, right? That's the place where it happens.
So let's say that you have someone who's been doing a lot of their work and, recognize that they're moving more towards secure attachment. I'm asking for a friend.
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
And once again, my picker isn't broken, right? right. So how do you know, like, what do you see when they start re-engaging in relationships, when they're moving more towards secure attachment? Well, let me ask you if this is true. I would think they're no longer attracted to chaos.
Right.
correct?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, you know, when, depending on the attachment style, you know, what was the original attachment? Was it avoidant or was it anxious? Depending on where they're at on that, where they kind of started, as they get moving towards secure, they tend to be just much more in tune with what does a healthy individual look like personally, right? What does it look to have done a lot of work around healing, that early stuff? And they become much more measured in how much they disclose right away, how much they pursue right away. They're just very mindful that there is a balance in this dance of connection, which is you can't share too much, right? Like you can't pursue. Let me tell you my whole life story on my first date because I just need you to love me and and then I need you to know everything about me so you can decide if you love me because I just need you to love me, right? And I can't just like withdraw and be like, yeah, no, it's cool. Like, yeah, I'm wanting to date. Yeah, I want a relationship, but yet, I don't tell you anything about myself and I don't engage, right? They're really looking at this balance of give and receive. And they're looking at that with the individual. And as you get closer to secure attachment, you're no longer willing to be available for things that rehearse those old stories, those old wounds. And so they become much more measured in who and how a person is showing up in the very early days of dating, because the very early days of dating are filled with anxiety, right? Either you really, really like somebody and you don't know if they like you, or somebody really, really likes you and you don't really like them. And then, if you go into, are we going to be committed? Are we, is the commitment going to last? So it's filled with what people call dating anxiety, because we're really, really trying to get this deep connection with somebody where our needs can be met at a different level than we can meet our own. So those first few stages of dating are really where people with a more secure attachment are just being very mindful to be looking at how is this other person showing up as an individual here.
Oh, that's good. And being discerning, right? Because even though there's a lot of anxiety around that, people tend to show up with their mask on, right? And they tend to show up with the, best self forward and giving it time to see how this plays out. Being an avoidant, for me to ask to have my needs met. So for example, if I'm dating someone and it's progressing, asking them, hey, would you do this for me? And then seeing how they respond. Is that a doable thing? I mean, to me, it feels weird.
Yeah, I think that, we have to be mindful of when we're talking about like our emotional needs being met, that's where we've made a commitment to meet other people's needs too, right? Like sometimes the avoidance kind of like, well, I have emotional needs, so like somebody meet them, and then we're like, oh, I got to do the other side of this. So, being understanding that doesn't occur until we have made a commitment to that, right? Until somebody has said, hey, I really like you. I choose you. Do you choose me? And it's like, yeah, okay, well, here are my needs, cool. And then we have the reciprocity. In dating, if there is no commitment, we have to understand our emotional needs are not the responsibility of the people that we're getting to know. Now, we can have boundaries, we can have expectations, we can say, I don't have those types of conversations with men until I'm in a committed relationship, right? And how somebody responds to that can be like, oh, well, I really appreciate that. It shows that you have, this, that, and the other values. Or they can say, what a prude, blah, 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 right? You're going to see how people respond as you hold a boundary, as you hold an expectation, as you express what your values are. How somebody responds to that often does disclose a little bit of their attachment style too. and their wounds.
Thank you for saying that, because I think there is that feeling of, okay, we're doing attachment work and we start looking at all of our relationships and
Mhm.
how am I how is my attachment showing here and here? And in reality, you can have a relationship attachment that
Mhm.
is supposed to be reciprocal.
Right,
That's
right.
the commitment, right? You've agreed that
Mhm.
we're both going to be trying here.
Right,
Right. But when you're dating someone, once again, that's not their job
right,
to regulate your emotions. Well, it's no one's job to regulate your
right,
emotions.
right,
It's your
right.
own, no matter
Yes,
what relationship you're in.
yeah, exactly.
But I love that you said that. Like, there are healthy boundaries that we put in place,
Mhm.
and we get to know someone,
Mhm.
and being aware of our attachment,
Mhm.
right? Like, well, I know that I tend to be more withdrawn.
Mhm.
I can share a bit more
Right, right.
in a
Yeah.
discerning manner,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
I can pay
Exactly.
attention to how much they're sharing with me
Mhm,
and be aware of
mhm.
that. But that is not an attachment.
Right.
That
Correct.
is someone that you're dating. Yeah.
That's someone you're dating. And this is where we do see, because there's that high anxiety time, we tend to see the wounding of attachment there. So maybe if you're an anxious attachment and you went out and you had a really great date with somebody, and you're like, I really, really, really want this person. I really, I want them to validate me. I want them to show up for me. They may call, text, right? And they want to make sure that they're pursuing you. And so that would show that because there's anxiety, because there's fear there, that's surfacing, right? So as we move to secure attachment, we begin to be more comfortable in that disconnection. You go on a date, you feel connected, this is great, this is awesome, I really like this person. Then you disconnect and it's like, I'm going to reach out to them and tell them I had a great time, I'd love to do this again. Are you free next Saturday? See how like that is more secure, because in that detachment, in them not being right in front of your face, there's security in being able to see them again, being able to connect again. And so you do see a lot of attachment, conditioning or wounding occur during those first stages of dating because of that anxiety.
Mm, so good. I didn't think this conversation was going to go there, but I'm so glad it did, because I think there's some confusion,
Right.
with myself, but also with others, that, when you start dating someone, I need to know their attachment patterns. Well, you're not going to know that
Mm. You're
until
gonna
you
see
are.
that. You're gonna
Exactly.
see that.
Into
You're gonna feel it. Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, that's
Mm.
a good point. Yeah. You're going to feel it. You're going to get a sense of, oh, this person isn't really engaged with me,
Mhm.
or this person is way too engaged
Right.
with
Is
me.
wanting too much of me, or
Yeah.
is not giving enough attention, time, interest to me. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, so good. I love that. Is there anything else you'd like to say about attachment?
No, I think it's honestly just such a cool, like, that securely attached, workbook of Eli's is just so good to just begin, delving into it and understanding it. And oftentimes, even as we get to that secure, we may have moments, we may have relationships in our life that show us something new within our conditioning or wounding because of the level of vulnerability we're showing up to. That's a good thing, right? Like if we're getting closer to secure and we're finding new levels of vulnerability, if we see a pattern from the past, don't shame yourself, don't put yourself down, just know that, you know what, that's showing itself because I'm becoming more vulnerable, I'm becoming more comfortable with being vulnerable, and then work through it.
Mm, that's great. I love that. Yeah, because it is a process.
Yeah.
And like Eli said, as did Joy, that this is not genetic, right? This
Right,
is
right.
learned, and we can unlearn it, and we can learn new skills.
And
Yeah,
yeah,
and that's the
absolutely.
beautiful part. I have to tell you, I'm going to encourage everyone to hop over and take Joy Malick's pod course. It's a
Mhm.
very short course. She's done an amazing job at breaking up information, so it's easy to digest and understand, and it's not a huge time commitment. I think it's only like less than 50 minutes, yet you get so much information, and it's about attachment patterns and in couples. And you're like, you can learn some skills. I think she has 6 tools that you can take, 3 for the anxious, 3 for the avoidant, to start implementing these tools into your relationships. I think it's very valuable. What do you think?
Oh, I love it. And just, just the way that Joy shows up for, the people that she's helping, and she just has such a heart for, wanting people to love themselves and pour into themselves so they can have happy, healthy relationships. So
it's so good. And if you use the code TEP, the Ego Project, TEP10, you can get 10 can't get it out of my mouth. 10% off. Okay. I tell you, you'd think I never spoke before. 10% off. And so just put that code in. It's promo code. It's an evergreen workshop, pod course workshop. So you will be able to return to this and listen to it every time and learn something new. Truly, I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I still do. Even doing this work professionally, doing this work individually, as I go and I listen to those courses and read the books, it does show you a new layer of something that you're like, I could so use that, or that resonates. So yeah, just never stop doing the work, because it's always there for your greatest good. So.
And we are all deserving of happy, healthy relationships that are reciprocal.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We all deserve that. Yeah. So we will put the link for Joy's pod course and for Eli's book, Securely Attached. Highly recommend both. Use them both and give us a comment. Let us know, if you're finding this information valuable, if you're using, attachment work to better your life so you get more securely attached. And make sure to like and subscribe, people. Come on. Seriously.
Yeah, absolutely.
Seriously. Okay. Like, subscribe. We need the algorithm to pick us up.
We do. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Cristine.
I'll receive that.
All right, everyone. We'll see you next time. All right. Bye-bye.